Life isn't perfect, and neither are we.
Nope. But we know how to face our fears
And have some fun.
and talk about all the messiest things of life.
Like the messiest things.
Get connected to yourself, get connected to others, and get connected to the life right in front of you.
This is The Connected Life with Justin and Abby.
That's me.
That's you.
And you. All right, you guys, I'm so happy. I'm so happy today because we're about to do, I've never talked about this subject in depth before on our podcast. And it is something that I get asked a lot about because I talk about it in speaking, ironically. Like I preach, and I'm very comfortable talking about this beautiful skill set that I have in preaching. And then everybody wants to come talk to me about it because there's not very many resources out there for it. So I feel very excited because we will get to positively collaborate about a subject that really affects our lives and probably lots of people's lives out there. And it will help you understand yourself or the people around you much more. So welcome, Jenna Zent.
Hello, thank you. I don't know where that accent came from, but I had a great face to go along with it.
It was.
So.
I wish people could see that. It was delightful.
I instantly felt like a butler. So. Yes.
I love your butler accent. It's posh.
Yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So we are here today. We're going to talk about ADHD.
Dun, dun, dun. I was laughing. I was like, how long will I, before I interrupt her showing what we're talking about?
Yeah. For people out there listening, this will be a funny episode because we will ping pong.
Oh, all the time. All bets are off now.
That is what our entire hangouts, every time we hang out is like bing, 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 bing. And we can follow it very well.
And it's funny though. It's like a blast of an hour and a half, 2 hours. And it's never, I don't even feel like we scratch the surface ever. Like, okay, that was what it was. See you again.
Yeah. So I think we'll talk about both of our stories about getting diagnosed.
Yeah, I want to hear I was excited.
And then we'll kind of talk about what we've learned and just what it's like to be us and what it's like to learn how to work through it. So if you guys are listening to this, we had Jenna on. We've had her on multiple times before, and she's a habit coach, which I think is awesome. And if you have ADHD or you know somebody with ADHD, you really should go through her habit course because they actually say that one of that's what therapy for ADHD is actually learning how to break things down in a way that your brain can handle to create habits, because routine and habits can help make up for some of the things that ADHD can create.
I heard something like, because we lack the internal structure that most people have, there's chaos.
In their brain.
We need more than most people external structure to like combat the chaos. So that's like you were saying, part of the treatment is usually learning how to like have structure outside so that there's more room for your internal ping pongs.
Okay. So I had a friend who, she was my assistant. So she was around me a lot. And she was like, one day she's like, you definitely are dyslexic or have ADHD. And I was like, what? And she was like, yeah, no, your brain is crazy. Like, now she wasn't saying it in a condemning way because she was dyslexic and she knew it and she'd been diagnosed, and it was like this thing that dramatically affected her world. And I remember I was like, okay, well, tell me like what it's like. And she's like, well, you do this thing and this thing and this thing and this. She goes through all these things that I thought were very normal to me.
Are you going to tell us what they are?
Well, I can't remember.
It's true ADHD fashion.
I can't remember all of them. I mean, there are things like I can't hold more than like 1 or 2 instructions at a time in my brain.
Yeah.
So like if there is, let's say you're giving me directions, after one of the directions, my brain blitzes out and I have no idea what you're saying.
100%.
Or there are things like I can't remember what I'm saying while I'm in the middle of talking.
Yes.
Like for long amounts of time. And my friends will be like, what? And they're like on the edge of their seats, but I have no idea what we're talking. I don't even know what subject we're on half the time.
It's like gone. It feels like amnesia where you wake up and you're like, oh, you're looking at me. I must have been saying something.
Yeah. And I couldn't sequence things, which is like, I couldn't figure out. A great example would be, we were just talking about this. I was so overwhelmed with cleaning growing up. And there were lots of reasons. When I was a teenager, my mom got closer and closer to being a hoarder as the years went over. So our house got crazier and crazier and crazier until it got to where, like, when I was trying to clean, it'd be like so messy. And then I had ADHD and I didn't know it. And so my cleaning, imagine you're in a hoarder's home and you start trying to clean one area and you get ADHD cleaning. Let me just explain it. So let's say that I am in the kitchen and I'm like, I need to clean the kitchen. So you start and you put a dish in the dishwasher. And then when you're doing that, you see a pair of scissors on the counter and you're like, oh, I need to go put these away. And so you go to the laundry room to put them in the drawer that they go in. And when you're in the laundry room, you see a towel and you see that towel and you're like, oh, that reminds me that I need to unpack my bag from the beach. And so then you like start unpacking your bag from the beach. And then you're like, I should probably organize all of this stuff. And so you take out the whole drawer because you want to put it back in an organized way. And now you have all the things everywhere. And then you feel overwhelmed and you quit and you didn't actually get anything clean.
Or do you ever loop back to the original task? You're like, oh yeah, I was unloading the dish. And you're like, start it again. And you're like, go on the same path. You're like, this is insanity.
Yes. And so it would take me hours and hours. And it was actually I couldn't do easy. So when I talk about sequencing, I couldn't do easy life tasks. So it would be like packing a bag for a trip felt so overwhelming. And I'd go into fight or flight, freeze or fawn. I'd go into a trauma response. I'd have a complete breakdown. And it was over small life things. But then while having that, I was very capable and competent. I've been running a successful business. People have always been like, I can't believe the amount of capacity you have and how much shit you get done, while you also can't do any normal life shit. You're like, it's confusing. You're simultaneously like a boss bitch and like an idiot. Like that was like kind of but so she didn't describe it quite that way, but she did say you have sequencing issues. I can see that you can't figure out when you're looking at a project, you can't figure out what to do, what order to do it in, unless it's the areas that my brain works really well in, like in business, I can order that stuff. But there was probably like a bunch more things.
What about names? Are names hard for you?
Yeah, definitely names are. But that wasn't like one of the main ones because there's just so many things. So I'll describe the analogy I learned. She gave me a book to read. I read it. And the analogy is this: your brain is like a nightclub. It is, there's a bouncer, and a normal person's brain could have like 20 people in the club dancing at all times. And like, there's lots of people, they're milling around, they're hanging out, they're having fun. A person with ADHD's brain is like a club that can hold like 4 people in the dance club. And there's a bouncer. And so if a new person comes in, the bouncer kicks someone out because the max capacity is only 4. So in a normal person's club, a new person comes in, but they have 20 other spaces. So they don't have to kick people out all the time because you may not always have 20 thoughts happening at once. So you have much more flexibility to have a new thought come in and not have it kick old things out. But in ADHD, I have a new thought come in and it automatically kicks other things out. So that's why if I'm in the middle of a conversation and a new thought comes in, it kicks out whatever I'm doing. I also
then with the impulse control, you say it. So if someone's crying about their grandma dying and you're like, new shoes? Are those new shoes? I love them. And then they're like, what? Have you done that before?
I have.
Me too.
Yeah. Okay. So she started talking about it and I literally thought that there was way more that she explained, and we'll keep talking about more things about it. But I thought, what you're saying is too good to be true. Like because I had grown up feeling this deep sense of I am so broken. I am so much worse than every other human. Everyone else knows how to be a human besides me. Everybody else knows how to make a bed besides me. I can't do simple stuff. Like I am so like messed up, broken, fatally flawed. And I remember that feeling of like, I literally created a whole theology that everyone else had way more things than me because I just felt like I was missing things from the beginning.
I would say like my brain was missing a piece because I could watch people operate. I'm like, I wasn't born with that piece. I would tell my kids, I'm like, you don't have that, mom. Like, she doesn't work that way.
Totally. So she would talk to me about it, but I didn't want to believe that it was true because it felt too good to be true.
Like almost taking the pressure off to grow.
Well, I was like, you mean there's a reason I've been this way my whole life and I'm not an idiot. Like, you mean there is something that explains all of this? You mean there is a thing that explains why I have a hard time with impulse control? Like, there was so many, and then like as you get older, you realize like, oh, this is where all of my anxiety around this thing came. And you start to see all of the things, but it felt so unbelievably good, like too good to be true. I was like, I don't want to hope that could be it, because if it's not true, then I just have to go back to feeling like broken. Yeah. Because I think somewhere in my mind, getting diagnosed with it felt like, the analogy I had is like, I felt behind, like there's a racetrack and everybody's running on the racetrack and I'm really behind them. And being diagnosed with like ADHD or dyslexia felt like somebody realizing, I've only been running with one leg.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, I may be behind, but I'm freaking a badass because I'm on this track.
Yeah.
Like, I'm actually on the track. Like, I might be better than all. No, I'm just kidding. Not better. I don't believe in hierarchy. But I did think like I'm as strong as everyone else, because even though I might be behind them in the race, I'm on the track with one leg. And that felt so different. It felt like the mentality would switch so much. So I think I'm the only person. So I went to the test, right? I went to a psychiatrist or whatever, and they did a test for me. And I remember thinking, I probably should like purposely miss a few because I'm so capable at life and I'm really good at tests. So I probably would never get diagnosed, is what I thought. So I was like, should I miss like one or two just to like help my odds? I didn't, but I got in for the test, and they're like, so you've never been tested for ADHD before? And I was like, nope. And they're like, I don't know how you survived this long. You scored very high. But I remember
I'm winning at ADHD. Yes.
But just being diagnosed changed my life. Honestly, even in my marriage, because Justin had judged me for so many things. He had been so harsh and so judgmental. And I think him and my dad, the irony is I'm pretty sure my dad has ADHD, but my dad and Justin both would be like, what are you, lazy? Like, you don't want to do this. You don't. And like, there's lots of things where I would postpone, like avoid tasks until the very last minute, and then only do them right when I had like procrastinate, and then do them right when you have the deadline, because that was the only way that I could get myself to focus.
Which is a key. They say that's so common with ADHD is procrastination, because the deadline makes their brain focus in a way that they can't find without it.
Yeah. So anyway, it felt like, Justin had to go on a few-year journey of learning how to understand how it affected me. And I will say, I was at a place, I was like 30 something when I found out. So it was not young. It would have been really helpful for me when I was younger, probably. But I was at a place where I didn't think the diagnosis meant I was free from responsibility of it.
Totally.
So Justin had to go into learning about it so he could have compassion on me. And I learned to have a lot of compassion on me. But then I went into it with like, okay, if I am missing a leg, then I have to figure out how to run on this track. And so that's why it became incredibly empowering for me to be like, oh, now I know what the problem is. I thought I was just broken. Yeah. I thought I was just made wrong. I'm not made wrong. And then the beautiful thing is, before I got diagnosed with ADHD, I listened to this book by Malcolm Gladwell, where I think it's David versus Goliath.
Okay.
And he does a whole chapter on how people with ADHD make the highest percentage of CEOs.
I've been Googling this because I'm like, there's just no way there's not a correlation.
Yes. And so what he talks about is, if a normal person's brain is like a highway, you can drive from point A to point B. You can do a straight shot and just get there. A person with ADHD is like somebody who can't drive on the highway. So they have to take all the back roads and do like a huge loop to get from A to B. But what that means is, like in business, there's often roadblocks or problems. So the highway gets closed. And if your brain only knows how to drive on the highway from destination A to B, you won't know what to do. But if you are used to doing 5 million whoop-de-woos and loops and turns to get to your destination and off-roading, then you actually don't feel threatened by off-roading. Yes. You don't feel scared. So ADHD people can be unbelievably solution-oriented and outside of the box thinkers, which is what CEOs typically need to be successful. And so because I had heard that, my initial thing of ADHD wasn't that I was less. I literally was like, I have a superpower that I hadn't realized why it caused me pain and also the benefit. And so now I've like leaned into all the strengths of it and feel really proud, and have also learned how to be soft and tender with all of the pain points of it.
And get yourself support in areas that you need.
Because I really needed help in a lot of areas.
And not shaming yourself. Mm-hmm. I think I've watched you you'd be like, okay, it doesn't excuse me not to grow, but also that's not where my best effort would be spent. So hiring assistant for errands or someone to help you with meal prep, or just the things that you're like, my CEO energy should be spent on CEO things.
Yeah, absolutely. Instead of how much energy it takes my brain to make a grocery list.
Oh. 100%.
Okay. So tell me about your journey a little bit.
Yeah. Well, actually you had mentioned something about like, didn't get diagnosed as a kid. And that's an interesting part is I think there was like, almost like because so many people were getting diagnosed in the 90s, people are afraid of labels. Mm-hmm. But then the interesting part is, and there's people like you and me who, because our parents, for whatever reason, didn't take us to get tested, we grew up just thinking we were broken versus understanding that we had something. Like it didn't feel boxing in. So so anyone out there who feels boxed in, I'm like, oh, what if you actually just had a way, like a word for how you're wired, and then you could support yourself better.
Yes.
So that you get to function at your highest capacity rather than like
I love that.
Trying to keep up with the people with 2 legs, you know?
Totally.
I'm like, oh, so I felt, anyways, so they talk about a lot how adults who don't get diagnosed as kids have a lot of shame that they have to unpack. And they even say that like half the healing is in the diagnosis.
Absolutely.
And I was like, so I got off the phone.
Wait, hold on. Before I jump in, this is an ADD moment, but I remember with my dad, so he homeschooled me, and he would be so aggressive because I would start crying with the thing that I was trying to do because it was genuinely hard for my brain, the thing that we were doing. And he genuinely thought I was just being a brat, like just like purposefully manipulative. So he would get harsh and mean. And then and so there became this loop inside of not getting diagnosed, not only affected how I saw myself, then how other people saw me. So then the narrative of I'm not good enough is now getting also confirmed by the people around me. Like my dad didn't know. If he would have known I was diagnosed with ADHD, he would have found every resource to help me, and he would have been really compassionate towards me.
Yeah.
Because he would have known I wasn't intentionally doing something to ruin things.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's so true with so many people. Yeah. That's crazy. My brother, so my mom has ADHD. All of her siblings have ADHD. It's usually hereditary. Mm-hmm. My brother has ADHD. Mm-hmm. But a lot of times the people who don't get diagnosed are the ones who can get through school. And you being homeschooled, I'm like, oh, this probably makes sense. Uh-huh. And then for me, I watched how intense, because my brother needed help. My mom's help was not help I wanted. So I manhandled myself, and I did. And then in high school, my mom told me that I wouldn't be able to go to college unless I got enough scholarships. So I felt like pressure internally to do really well to get money to go to college. But then when I got to college, and you have to read things for a long period.
Oh my gosh.
They almost say that the people who don't get diagnosed the longest are the ones who are smart enough that like can fake it till they make it to cover. So I'm like, I could fake it until I had to read 30 pages. And then I'd be like, I was like, what? I remember going to like the library for the first set of exams, and like 30 minutes in, I say blacked out, but I like all of a sudden was outside playing Frisbee with a friend. And I was like, wait, when did I make this choice? And then I'd go back in and I'd sit down again. And I was like, I remember like grilling my friends. I'm like, how do you study longer than 25 minutes?
Totally.
Like, I don't get it at all. And then even like for me, realizing how often too food, when I have to do something hard admin, I almost get anxious, like my anxiousness and like needing to concentrate myself. It's weird, but popcorn's that for me. So I'll like compulsively eat popcorn or chew gum because I feel so anxious about having to sit still that like it helps me. It's almost like fiddling, but with, like food. Getting some anxious out. Yeah.
Yeah.
That. And then, so anyways, it wasn't till I remember my husband is not ADD, and he's more linear thought, and he's slower and patient. So but he's probably the same with me messiness. So he wasn't like adjusted in that sense, but then I compared myself to him because he could succinctly, like I would always say, like he'd explain A, B, C, D. And I'd be like, A, D, F, A. And people would be like, what? And I'm like, catch up. If you can't catch up, I don't have time to tell you. Like, but it wasn't even like, it was almost like an anxiousness. The idea of meticulous, like you were talking about the different things that were hard for you. Like you couldn't see it, visualize it. I couldn't follow recipes. Recipes are still literally hard for me.
Oh yeah.
I'm like, okay, step 1. And then I get to step 2 and I'm like, wait, there's butter in step 1. Like I thought I read it. And then I'd have to and then I'd read it out loud and then I'd forget. And I was like, oh my gosh. So recipes, like when people, I'm a good cook, but when they ask me for the recipe, I'm like, well, I don't know how I got here. Who knows if I'm going to get back here. I can't set up. So anyways, I remember one time like actually crying because like I just became very judgmental of myself towards like comparing myself towards my husband. So we'd speak and he'd be like so flowy and be able to say all the things. And then I'd like get 2/3 of the way through my point and I couldn't even remember what I was saying. And I'd turn to him and he'd just have to land all my points for me because like, yep, that's what I was saying. And then I'd go somewhere else in my brain. Or I remember cleaning the garage and he could actually clean the garage in about 2 hours and finish it. And I would go out there with the same goal and get our DVDs alphabetized. I'd be like, dang it. But the weird part when you were talking about the loop cleaning, I almost find that like I have this weird out of body experience where I'm aware I'm not doing what I want to do, but I feel like I can't control myself to stop doing it. Where I'm like, no, go back to but I'm just going to finish the laundry. But I realized for a lot of it before, like I got like this last year, I've gone on creating external structure in my habits. So I don't feel the same, but I would be like, I almost couldn't trust myself to come back to it. So I needed to ride this wave as long as because I wasn't in control of me. So whenever the waves came, you ride them till the end. So,
well, one of the things you're talking about also is that, so with ADHD, you have where your thoughts are ping-ponging everywhere or hyperfocus.
Yes.
And so hyperfocus is like this moment where it's almost like crack cocaine for people who have ADHD, where your brain somehow does zero in. And it zeroes in for a long amount of time. For me, I can have like a couple days sometimes in hyperfocus or like at least a full day in hyperfocus where I will be like locked in and my brain is focused and I can think through everything. It's like ADHD minimizes for a little while. And then I normally have the like after a hyperfocus session, then I'm like very ping-pongy and have no idea what is happening. But hyperfocus is that wave when your brain can lock into something. So most ADDers, when they can, want to ride that wave. Like when you are focused, when you're like, I should go back to emptying the dishwasher, but I'm enjoying alphabetizing these DVDs. But like your brain hits in that focus mode to do the DVDs, and that feels good to your soul to finally hit a focus point.
Yeah.
So most people, when they do hit that, they like to stay there.
That makes a lot of sense. Also, I kept relating to how you were saying the narrative of being told you're lazy and then just feeling lazy and broken.
Mm-hmm.
I felt that so strongly. Like I had this narrative of I was lazy, and then people would be so confused around me because they're like, you literally never stop working. But I'm like, right. But I have a messy room. And that's part of what I heard as a child. So I, when you're like, it's not the only piece, but now too, as I've encountered more adults with ADHD, the lazy and the broken are the like narratives that they got that were put on when they didn't know it was ADHD. And I'm like, oh. And interesting for me, I find it with my kids. Like I'll be with them because you're with them for long periods of time. It's not like an adult where you're engaged in fabulous conversation.
Totally.
And then I'll like all of a sudden be like, oh, I wasn't listening. And my daughter would be like, you're not listening. And then I actually kind of I would shame myself of like, be here now. Don't do other things. Like, for a while I was like, am I afraid of intimacy? I was so like, what is this deal? And then so now just kind of giving myself grace, like, oh, your brain, I feel like my brain or my attention is like a hot air balloon that like I forget to hold the string sometimes and it starts to float off. And then I grab it again and I'm like, okay, got it. And I'm like, what are you saying? And then it like goes off again. So instead of thinking it's like my value for them, I think that's a big part of me not feeling as broken. It's like, oh, this isn't reflective of my value for you. Because in conversation, I love hearing about other people's thoughts and I ask them a ton of questions. But then like, well, if someone's monologuing for a little bit, all of a sudden my brain, the hot air balloon will be released. I was like, crap, they were talking about their mom trauma and I forgot to listen and they could probably see it. And then like I'd go back in again and so then I'd feel so bad about myself. I'm like, why don't you care enough to listen? Or why are we thinking about it? But realizing like, oh, like this isn't a statement for any of my values at all. One of the reasons I realized I was ADHD and finally went to the psychiatrist was because I I would hear people who are on the spectrum and they would talk about how they'd be mid-sentence with someone and walk away. And I was like, that's my whole life.
100%.
I've been in, especially in group conversation, like group things, but like I've been in leadership too, where I'd like be talking to people, awareness of like, be kind, don't just talk to your friends, like make people feel welcome. And then all of a sudden I would like be 5 steps away and like, oh, I thought I was just talking to Susie. And I like turned around and Susie's like confused and wondering why I walked away. And then I was like, I'm so sorry. And then I'd like spiral and be like, I'm a terrible person. I don't care about Susie's heart. And you're like, oh my gosh, no, this is just ADHD. Oh, anyways. So I looked up autism spectrum and they actually say that a lot of people who have ADHD think they're on the spectrum because of some incident like that. But they were saying the motivation's so different, where for us, it's not that we don't care. It's impulse control and lack of focus. Like the focus leaves and then we drift off, not because I could actually really care about what you're saying. And that helped me because for a while, like,
so you're like, your motives are actually good.
Yes.
They're not the problem. You're not a bad person. You're not selfish. You're not self-absorbed. It's literally like you want to love people and you're fighting this internal battle.
You're like, and when my brain comes back to me, it's yours, I promise, but we just have to catch it for a second. Actually, that was another thing because one friend was like, you're a narcissist. You like, don't always listen, or it's about you. And it's so they actually talk about how often that can be misdiagnosed with ADHD because they do come back, or like what I was saying, if someone was sharing about their grandma and I'm like, do you like my new shoes? And they're like, it's all about you, but it's just a lack of impulse control and like the not being able to control your brain rather than I don't care about you or what I have to say is more valuable. I think that was huge for me. I'm like, oh, it's true. I don't believe that. There's not a core in my, like a atom in my body that believes I'm more important than you, but totally. I can't control my brain sometimes.
Well, and then not only that, I'll just describe what it's like for me. So let's say you're having a deep conversation about, you're talking about your marriage and something that's really vulnerable. And I see something like, oh my God, I think you look so pretty right now. And what happens is, like, I go back to the nightclub analogy because that helps my brain the most. My brain will think it has to hold on to that thought, which is not even true. I don't have to end up telling you that you look pretty right now. Like, I actually don't. But the
urgency.
But what happens is my brain is like, no, I have to remember this. I have to remember this. I have to remember this. And then I spend so much time and energy trying to remember this thing that doesn't matter, but it actually causes my body anxiety. I start not only feeling mental tiredness because I'm trying to hear what you're saying, but I'm also trying to remember this thing. My body will start to lock up in anxiety. So oftentimes it is self-absorbed because I am not, the motive isn't self-absorbed. Half the time it literally is like, I really like this thing about what you just said, or I really like this thing about you, or I think you look really pretty right now, but I have to say it. That's the impulse control thing, is like, and I do try to
tell yourself.
Well, what I do often is I make notes now.
Yes.
So that I don't interrupt people as much. But then I have to tell them, like, I'm really sorry, I have to write this down because otherwise it will literally haunt me. And it's like I can't jump over that hurdle in my brain. I can't get past the idea that I have to tell you this thing. And so I either have to write it down, which really works for me pretty well.
Yeah.
Or I just have to say, I'm so sorry. Can I just tell you your mascara looks really nice? Okay. Now tell me about da 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 da. And that's one of the ways that I'm like, yeah, that's probably not fun. I remember my dad has ADHD. And so I remember I'd be like crying and he'd be like, look there's a crow. And I'd be like, whatever. But this is why diagnosis and learning information helps, because I would have been able to have compassion for him.
Yeah.
If I would have known. And I would have also been able to understand it wasn't about me.
I was going to say, so I've looped my 9-year-old into letting her know that I have ADHD because she does not. And she gets very, like, she'll ask me for something and then like find me in the garage kind of wandering around. And she's like, where's my bagel? I was like, that's it. She's like, why are you in the garage?
Oh, wait, this is one of the things that the girl said reminded me of. I can walk out to the kitchen 3 times to get something. And when I get to the kitchen, have no idea what I'm trying to get. And then I go back to my room where I was. And then I remember, oh, I needed to get water. So I walk back out to the kitchen, forget why I go there. I come back to my room, remember what I needed. I go back to the kitchen. It can take me like 3 to 4 times to remember what I am doing.
Oh, do you ever talk? I talk out loud because that's one of my hacks is like, I'm going to the kitchen to get water.
Yes.
I'm going to get water.
Yes. It's the only way to remember.
So then, well, like I was saying with my daughter, so I'm like, hey, mom's brain works different than everybody else's brain. So I have ADHD. So sometimes like I actually always want to help you, but I'll forget. So can you be kind in reminding me? Like it helps me like want to help you more where I feel sad and, when you are aggressive about reminding me. So would you help me work with my brain? And so anyway, she's like, hey mom, I remember my bagel. I think your brain took you somewhere else. So like, yeah, it's true. It's funny.
That's sweet.
Both my parents have ADHD now that I recognize it. My mom looks like crazy get her done. So it's kind of cool that I have that. But then my dad's this ideation, tons of, he'll like be like, you know how you can Costco can revolutionize their food court, and they list out a 10-part plan. And I'm like, okay, yeah, that could be an option. So I totally feel that too.
You know, I was thinking about, I love the hack with your daughter. I think that's really good. I think the more I can help people understand why I do what I do so it doesn't come off. Another thing that I've noticed is I can be a little bit like aggressive or intense sounding when I'm having impulse control, like the anxiety of trying to control what's happening inside of me. I can come across really short with people
because that's one of the things, like you want to get your point out quickly as effective and quick as possible. Cause it'll lower the when you said that anxiousness, I was like, it's so true. It motivates. I'm like, I won't be okay unless I say this, or how did that feel? And they're like, I think that was a tender question, just not asked in a tender way. Oh my God, were you dying? What?
Yeah. Yeah. That's very, very true. I have a friend who has, actually a lot of my friends have ADHD, but I have one of them. And so I've learned to not take it. I will share something very meaningful. And this has for sure happened. I shared something very vulnerable and meaningful. They did not respond. They literally got their phone out and called somebody. I started. And I was like, what just happened? And thank God I understand that they have ADHD and that I just have to tell them, because that has happened regularly. Things like that, where like I will like share something. Maybe I'll cry and say something, and then they will just text somebody, and so there's two things. One, we always go back and have them like I will say like, hey, that felt vulnerable for me to share, and then you bounced out. Help me understand what's going on. Without villainizing, without being like, you're selfish, you don't care about me. Yeah. Why don't you want to be here with me? It's more like, okay, what just happened? And then often they're like, oh, I actually was really caring what you had to say. And then I realized that I had this thing, and the impulse control of I'm trying to get the thing that is causing my brain pain out.
That's a good way to put it.
So that I can be fully present with whoever I'm present with. Yeah. And so I could recognize that the call they had to make to that person was a quick logistical call that they realized they had to do. And they like forgot that they were in the middle of that moment, but they were doing it to get it out of the way so that they could connect. But then because ADHD is real, sometimes people forget to circle back.
100%.
And so they never,
message, you're like, see, they
never circled. They didn't even notice that they had not responded. Yeah. So I had to gently be like, hey, that would be helpful. And then they did. And I mean, it's happened like probably 20 times. And I just have learned I love this person and I have empathy. And so I'm going to be gentle with my needs, kind of like what you're asking for your daughter. I need to be gentle with my needs, but I can remind them and nudge them, where in the past I would have just been a victim to it. Like, see, they don't care about me. I'm not going to tell my stories to them. This proves that they're not interested in my life. This proves that And then I'm just like, no, this proves that their brain has ADHD.
That's so good. And I think for me, I've had to go on the same level of empathy for myself.
Yes.
So like all the texts that I don't respond that are sending like I instantly go to this, like what the villainization message you could have sent to that friend. Yeah. I reflect it to myself. I'm like, see, they're going to think you don't care. See, you're proving that you're selfish. See, you're proving that you think you're too busy for their friend. Like all these intense things. I'm like, none of that is true. Like it might be a message that they get, but I can quickly clear it up because I know my heart. So then I used to almost like do, that's a lot of where I realized, so my triggered response of choice is fawning.
Yeah.
So I realized how much of it was me trying to clean up ADHD messes.
Oh.
So then being like,
can you explain fawning?
Fawning is like trying to ingratiate yourself to someone to be okay. Like if I say mine of choice was, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Like,
me too. And
if I say it enough, you'll believe it, or I'll be able to convey the depth that I feel it kind of too. And then like make us be okay by fun, joking, groveling, whatever. It could come in different flavors. So then with friends, whenever I'd realize, which I wouldn't know, but my ADHD would potentially create a disconnect because I'd lose connect, forget, go away, interrupt, not respond, whatever it looked like, or turn the conversation to something about me. I then would like trigger, and then I would feel so much shame that it wouldn't be about them. So then realizing like, oh, you actually, the kinder thing you could do would be to give yourself grace and be like, oh, I'm sorry, ADHD, what were you saying? And then not actually turn it into my shame spiral. Be like, oh, all those messages aren't true. If they're feeling that way, that's the story they're telling themselves. They're powerful enough to let me know. It's mostly friends that I've had conversations with anyways, but like not beating myself up over it too.
Yeah. It's a lot of work to be kind to yourself, but the more you understand it, it feels like it helps empower you to be more kind. I know, like when you just read a book called Driven to Distraction, that so you loved. And they also have a book for spouses, right?
Yes. And it's something about distraction. It's the same author. So look up Driven to Distraction. What I thought from the outside looking in from our conversations was that just hearing it helped you be more kind to yourself. The more you learned, the more you heard, like, that's my story. That is how I work. That is the more you like normalized and saw that. And this is what shame is. Shame is like, you are worse than everyone else. You're the one person who struggles with this, instead of like, oh, this is common and it's normal and you're normal. That's so good and so true. It's interesting because what led me to the tipping point was kids. Because I could, like, my capacity was so big and I was smart enough, but the more people that were in my internal world was like glitchy. And I remember having my third kid and I like didn't feel like I could function. I was like glitch. Like when you're overloaded, when ADHD person's overloaded, they almost can't have conversation. I feel like it's like a thermometer of anxiety is like rising because I'm like, I can't hear myself. Like I've lost touch with the ground in this overstimulated environment.
Yeah.
That's one thing I was going to say though. I found it really, really helpful. I thought I was really confused because I needed a lot of alone time. And I thought, I was like, I don't think I'm an introvert, but I need a lot of alone time and I need more. I have to get back in touch with myself, and I can only do that not in stimulating environments. So when someone else is in the environment, it's too distracting, but I can get back in touch with myself. So it's less about the energy and more about like giving my brain a rest.
Yes.
Do you find that to be true?
Yeah, I do. I need a lot of alone time or no alone time. I would say the way I do alone time is very similar to the way I go into hyperfocus, which is like, I normally need like 3 days alone or like after work, I'm alone for 3 days. And then I want to be with people for like 5 days. So it's
boomer
like,
bust.
It's not necessarily the healthiest skills, but it is true. You know, I was actually having an aha, even in this podcast right now, so I get so much anxiety in meetings. So work meetings with like 5 people, I'm normally fine. But if we get to like 8 to 10, especially if there's like 15 to 20, and it's like a work meeting or like some kind of meeting where we're supposed to be focused, I will get so much anxiety that I feel like I'm going to have a panic attack. And that's been for years. And I've like been like, why is that? Why do I feel so? But the amount of impulse control with the amount of, so in a meeting with 20 people, you can't talk all the time. You can't bounce off things with what people are saying because that would literally destroy the meeting. You have to be still and you have to sit quiet for a long time while there's lots of stimulation. And I'm just now, like during this meeting, our podcast, I was like, oh, that's why I feel so overloaded by stimulation and having to be trapped and quiet that I actually build and build and build. And I used to always be like, is it like this team is a horrible team or am I feeling some kind of weird thing in the atmosphere? Oh. But that's probably the journey I've been on the last few months. So I figured out I had it a couple of years ago, but I think revelation kind of takes time to expand. But I'm recognizing that the anxiousness that's in my body so often with trying to do impulse control.
That's so real. With me.
And I have like crazy, this is the last thing.
No, go.
If I have to sit still or stand still or or actually even if I'm moving, I will often think like, what is the craziest thing I could do right now? Like I have like a lot, and then I'll have impulses that will be like, what if, like I'll be in church and I'll be sitting there and like trying to like listen and whatever. And I'll be thinking like, what if I stood on my chair and just yelled, fuck, at the loudest that I could? Like, I think of like, what is the craziest thing I could do? My brain always goes there in any situation. Like, what if I, like, there's this pastor at Bethel, Bill Johnson, for some of you who know who it is. And sometimes I'll like be talking to him and I'll be like, what if I just leaned over and kissed him? Now, I have no desire to do that, but that's like the kinds of things my brain will think. And then I will like loop on it. And I'll be like, what if I just grabbed this stranger and sang a song to them? And then I just like loop about it.
That is so, I just realized I do something similar, but like whenever I hear someone who's blown up their life, I'm like, what if I'm secretly blowing up my life? Like, what if I don't? So then I think through all of it. Has I been embezzling money? I'm like, I don't even work for a company, but like, and then I loop on it and it gets anxious. And then I'm like, what if I'm having an affair? And then I have to like, sometimes I'll go through my phone and be like, look, you don't text any men. You're not having an affair. Like, you're not like this split personality, but like you said, you get this hyper focus. And oh yeah. And even the thing about church, I used to think, because I cannot, I'd be like, this is such a good message. And then all of a sudden I'd come back to my brain and I was like,
what am I thinking about?
Wait, 5 minutes, like shoot. And then, but I took it as like, I must not love Jesus enough, or yeah. So then the interesting part, like a more recent hack this year in like my walk with the Lord literally has been walking, where like a little bit of movement or running or biking is really helpful. And I think that's something about the biped motion?
Bilateral movement is really good for your brain and your emotional nervous system.
Yes. And I realized like, oh, I can chat with Jesus and concentrate on a way that like, I didn't think it was possible to pray more than 2 minutes for me. Like
totally.
And I'm like,
when you're like walking or riding your bike.
Totally. And I thought like the most Christian way to connect with Jesus was like sitting on your couch quietly with like a mug of something. And I don't like coffee, and like a warm blanket. And I couldn't focus. No. But now I'm like, oh, I have amazing chats with Jesus when I'm walking or in motion, or even like you were saying about the like needing the alone time to recharge and stuff in motherhood. Like I can't do the days, but I can give myself a few like 30 minutes alone to walk outside. Cause even outside's quieter and not as stimulating. And a big thing, this is a silly one in our marriage, but my husband loves movies and I can't physically sit through a movie. I pause TV shows halfway through. I don't watch much TV because I'm like, there's that internal motor that's like running. You're like, there's so many things that could be doing.
Oh yeah.
And for a while, Aaron thought I was bad at resting.
Oh,
and
that makes sense.
Yeah. And I'm like, I can learn to lean into rest, but like restful things like a walk is helpful. Like that's where I find rest. I almost think of it like I have excess energy and it's like a cup that's too full. Like you know how if a cup's too full, like it's at the brim, if you move it, it'll like spill. But if you lean over and take a sip before you move it, it'll like give you enough margin to like not make a mess.
Yes.
That's what I feel like me taking a walk or doing something every day. I burn off my excess that will make a mess and I can show up more normally.
You can control your impulses more. You have less, your rope is longer.
Yeah.
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 Okay. Talk about how it has, I have one question. Did you feel like in college, you were a fraud at school then?
I felt I barely made it.
Yeah.
I barely made it. I had a scholarship.
Did you struggle? Like, am I smart or not? Did you have any thoughts about that?
No, I thought it was all disciplined. Because when I could do the things when I'd go to class instead of the beach,
yeah,
I would like do fine. Or even like calculus, I couldn't make myself go to class. It was like Calc 3 and I couldn't get myself there. So I just decided to teach myself and I got a B by teaching myself Calc 3. So I was like, I know I'm smart. It's the lazy, it's the discipline. So I think that's why it was in this season when we were talking about habits and how strong that narrative was. I had all this proof of years that was actually ADHD.
Right.
That I was like, see, I am lazy. Like, good thing you're smart, because I almost was embarrassed about being smart enough to get through college, because I was like, oh, no raw talent. Like that's not, there's nothing admirable about what I did. Oh. Even like pulling off graduating a year early. I actually just had shame where I'm like, it's not like I did great though. Like I just did it. I just did it fast. The irony though is that my best grades were when I had the least free time. So there's a couple semesters that I had 21 units, which is a ton, was working an internship and working. So I had like so much because I had no free time. So it was almost like I found I couldn't trust myself. So if I had to just go to this, then go, like you were saying, like the sequence, then Jenna goes here and then Jenna goes here, I would show up. But if it was like Jenna chooses what she does. I was like, Jenna's going to the beach. Shoot. I'll never forget this one time I was sitting down trying to like study, and I was like for a test the next day. And then all of a sudden I was like, okay, the next 4 hours, I think we get it, blah, blah. And I literally felt like I woke up playing flashlight tag in a park somewhere else. I was like, Frank, how did I get here? But we're going to stay since we're here.
It's very true. And that's why sometimes I'll become a workaholic for seasons, because it's easier for my brain with that much structure and not having choices and those things than when I have, so I can like, you can get a ton done when there's deadlines all the time. So like I currently work multiple jobs but I am more capable than when I only do one.
Yes. Your production like dramatically increases.
Because my brain kind of switches between hyperdrive or just like floating away all the time.
I wanted to talk about, well, I don't know if you're interested.
Yeah.
I actually didn't have this, or changing gears entirely. We're talking about sex, ADHD and sex.
Good.
But I had such a hard time. I didn't have an orgasm for the first like 7 years of marriage.
Yeah.
And we didn't really talk about it because no one talked about those things. Like people would talk about not figuring it out maybe a year in, but I felt like I was past the threshold of like talking about it. So anyways, but more recently, and then we figured out some things, and frankly, like, getting some vibrators, which was super helpful for us. And then, so now it's like, we always think about year 7. It was like a game changer. And now we love our sex life. But like looking back, I'm like, one of the books I was reading talks about how ADHD affects like, almost like you were saying, hyper focus or not being able to focus. And that's true for a lot of people with sex with ADHD. Either often there's addicts because it's the one time they feel super focused.
Right.
Or there's people like me in my camp who would like, it was so low stimulating in a sense of like, it's quiet. There's just one person that I couldn't hold on to my brain. So like an orgasm for a girl, which is so much like concentrating and be here present. Now. Yeah. And I couldn't get present. So then it was like my husband, so painful for me of like, why am I broken? And then of course painful for my husband, because it was like, either she's not interested. Cause in the middle of sex, I'd be like, do you think spaghetti's good for tomorrow night? And he'd be like, what? Or I'd be like, did so-and-so get their mole check out on their back? And he was like, what? Like all the time. And just the lack of orgasm was the most obvious, the idea that I couldn't focus. So he took it as like, I'm not good at it, or like, she's not attracted to me. And it was just so freaking painful. And now like finding out, oh my gosh, like I think that's it. Like you were saying, getting the diagnosis is one thing, and I totally cried. But then finding the years of unpacking the ramifications and how it's like the far-reaching effects it's had on your life. You're like, oh, if I'd only known that, I would have like not shamed myself and like talked about it, or found like got a vibrator or some other things that have been helpful. And I'm like, oh. And even just the pain of like, assume my husband's, journey of thinking that it was him not being interested enough to be like, no, my brain just works differently. I'm so sorry it caused you pain.
Oh yeah.
Let's figure out how to make this work.
If your brain is jumping around all the time, it's going to still be jumping around.
I used to put a pillow over my head because I was like, if I'm not looking at things, I won't get distracted. And then one of my friends told me that she has some trauma with sex, and that her counselor was like, when you know you're fully healed, you'll be able to look at them. Like, that's why. So then I was like, crap, I'm not healed. So then I'd like try to stare at him, and then it was just, neither were helpful. I mean,
it's very true. I often will have to have Justin, like I'll have him pray for me. Oh. Or I will write a note. Often I have to brain dump before.
Oh, that's smart.
So that I write all of the things that are currently on my brain. Or sometimes, honestly, we've started sex and I'm like, hold on a second. I have to, which isn't my favorite, but I also know I will take this 30-second thing away from sex to write down the things that are driving me crazy in my brain so that I can be present.
It's so good.
So I'll do that. Or I'll have him talk to my body. And be like, you can be present. You can be safe. You can relax. You can let go. Because even I think that the anxiety and the being on edge, when you have ADHD, there's like almost a hypervigilance you're in a lot of the time.
It's like the driving force it reminds me of like a motor in my belly. Like, it gets me doing stuff.
Yeah. And so I have to like proactively like come down. And so oftentimes he'll like speak like, you have permission to slow down, to relax, to be present, to just enjoy. And then something that I tell a lot of women that has really helped me with my focus is I will narrate in my head what is happening. Oh. He's grabbing my hip and it feels so good There's pressure on my hip. I like how much pressure he's putting on my hip. It feels good to have him grab my hip. That sounds so funny, but it dramatically helps me.
I mean, that's like me saying, I'm going to the kitchen to get a water bottle.
Yes. It's like the exact same thing, but in sex. And what I've noticed is it also turns my pleasure up for that sensation, because now I'm consciously paying attention to that sensation.
That's a great idea.
With ADD, lots of times I'm trying to not pay attention to all of the sensations because there's so many sensations that will distract me. So then in sex, I'm purposefully trying to pay attention to certain sensations.
That makes a ton of sense.
And so I will literally say it, and I'll be like, I love when he does this. But my mind, I mean, and I think every woman's mind is a thing they have to navigate in sex, but especially if you have ADHD. Have you found any other
I was going to say one of the things,
tips?
I think that is interesting though, like how you have to be present, but then when you have ADHD, how much harder it is to be present.
Yes.
So I think that's one of the things I didn't associate with for so long, because I was like, oh, a lot of people have this issue. Like,
totally.
We will, like if we're going through my list, or like maybe sometimes it's connection, but usually it's more logistics I need to get out. Like you said, a brain dump. We'll do it naked. So we'll be like, okay, let's like just chat through our week naked first. Cause I'm like, or like what the rest of the day is going to look like or what just happened. And then it can lead into whatever, but it's like my brain dump together or what I need him to weigh in on, but it's fun. It's a little spicy.
Yeah. That's really good. Okay. Let me see. I'm just checking my notes on the irony. Okay. There's a couple things I want to talk about. Well, one, I do just want to empower people. I am a speaker. That's like something I've done for years as a career. And I have ADHD. And I often forget what I'm saying while I'm on stage speaking in front of thousands of people. And because I've accepted it about me, I find it cute and endearing. And I just say like, oh, what am I talking about? Does anybody know? And it's probably the number one thing that I get comments on is like, you're so cute and endearing when you forget what's happening. And it makes me feel like if you can do it, anyone can do it. And I just want people to know that, there's hacks you're going to have to figure out. Like I have to have hacks in every area of my life. Like, what do I do in this situation at work when this is happening? What do I do when my brain forgets this? Like I have to create systems to be helpful for my weakness, but that doesn't mean that there's something you can't do. Like you can do anything. Like the diagnosis doesn't have to limit your view of what is possible.
I read one book recently that said it's not a disability, it's a biodiversity. So rather than, because it is something about like the solutions that are available. They said that almost ADHD people are uniquely skilled at being solution like bringers. And that's where the benefit outweighs what we can't get for other people. Yep. We're so much stronger in that area. So it's like, instead of thinking of a disability where I'm just left with, minus a leg, it's like, oh no, but I have this superpower that you don't have. Therefore, like, it's just different.
Yeah. I love that so much. That's what I was going to say. One of the reason I've been able to transform my life, I think, is actually ADHD. Because even though I didn't know I had ADHD, at a young age, I learned I have to do things in bite-sized chunks, which other people don't have to do. Like, I'm like, for me to learn how to clean a kitchen, I had to learn how to just start by taking all the dishes to the sink. That's a very bite-sized chunk. Just do that. Just do that. And I'd have to like tell myself, I had a best friend who actually really helped me with this when I was 20. I didn't know I had ADHD, but we all knew I needed help because I would legitimately have complete emotional breakdowns if it was my turn to clean the kitchen and I had no ability to figure out how to do that. So she'd be like, just take all the dishes to the sink. Just do this. Just do this. Nope, don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. Nope, just do this. So then I would do that, and I'd do that over and over again. I had to learn the same thing over and over and over and over again. But I learned that if I repeat something small, it will go into my long-term memory. So when I talk about the club analogy, that's only with short-term thoughts. So short-term thoughts, something comes in, it'll bounce something out. But long-term thoughts, I'm fine. So once I've memorized something, my first step, cleaning the kitchen, is always to take the dishes to the sink, if that's what it is. Then my long-term memory will be fine. I just have to do things enough. That's why structure also helps people with ADHD, because if you have structure that's consistent enough, it goes into your long-term memory and your brain has an I can break down almost any task into like the most bite size. Like we need to do this one thing and then this one thing and this one thing and this one thing, because my brain had to learn how to take anything and make it smaller because I could not handle 3 to 4 steps.
Yeah.
So I was like, I need one. What's the one next thing to do? And that is how I changed my entire life. It wasn't like, okay, how do I change all of my beliefs about money? I'm like, okay, well, where do I start? I need to hear a different view about money than what I have. Okay, I'm just going to do this one thing. I'm just going to read this one book. Okay, I'm just going to say this one phrase. I'm just going to change how I talk to myself, and just like one step at a time. But I built a history with myself that if I repeated one little thing over and over again, that it would transform me. For me, normally it's like 2 to 3 years. Like I might change a habit, but like I will then become, if I stick with one core value that I want to change, within 2 to 3 years, it's like absolutely natural and I don't have to think about it at all. But the science of transformation, like everything I do with my job, which is helping people transform their lives, came from this ADHD way of being able to break things down into the smallest bites. And so I think that, and then being solutions oriented, like people get stuck so much in their life. They'll be like, I don't know what to do because I can't talk to my husband about this and I can't do this. And I'll be like, well, what about, and I'll have 5 other ideas for them.
I always say I don't waste time in the can'ts.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, yeah, that's not helpful. What can you do though?
Totally.
Like there's always something you can do.
Yes. And I think that is what I have to offer the world. Like you may not have ADHD and you can come to me and you can give me a problem and I can give you solutions. So talk about, because you've transformed your life with habits. Let's just do a quick thing about how that has helped you in your life with ADHD.
Yeah. Like you were saying, doing the small things so that there's external structure, and then just realizing that like if my external world is less chaotic, then my internal uniqueness of my brain doesn't feel as overwhelming. It's not compounding. It's like space for it, if that makes sense. So I went on a journey of like changing my habits. My house was a mess. I did nothing. I didn't even take birth control. That was nightly because I was like, oh, I can't trust myself to take it every day. And then I just slowly tackled like 1% better. My phrase was little bits of better. Like it adds up. There's like a compound interest, and then seeing dramatic shifts. Like you were saying, I was like, I want sustainability. I don't want flash in the pan successes and feeling overwhelmed with like, I don't even know where to start. You're like, just do the first thing. What do you want to do? And then I bring in my solutions is always bringing people to how can I help? Yes. Or even like, if you're really good at this, I'm like, Michelle's never overwhelmed with laundry.
Totally.
I'm going to ask Michelle what Michelle does. And I'm going to go to Michelle's laundry room and see what she does and be like, is this strategic? Does this help? And then people are like, oh, I didn't realize I had all these, this is what success is. So then I pick apart people's lives.
Yes.
So I can learn from them.
This is literally how I've transformed my entire life. Is like, I find one person who can do the thing that sounds crazy to me.
Yep.
And then I try to take it's like dissecting something until it clicks.
And you're like, oh, I found the magic and this feeds into this. And then they're like, I didn't realize that my life was made of that. You're like, yes, you're welcome.
Yeah, because some brains, the way I can naturally help others with solutions is the way they can naturally, and this is what I love. Yeah, they can naturally execute things that are hard for me. And so this makes it so that we all need each other.
Yeah. My husband comes to me now because he's so linear and so consistent and patient with explaining and getting things done. But he comes to me for solutions now, which is fun. And then I have him help me with the linear homework. Teaching our kids anything. I'm like, can you go explain that? Because I'm just going to be like, 7. The answer is 7. And they're like, why are you yelling? I was like, sorry, it's just going to get out of me. Fine. Yes. 3 plus 4 is
real example.
Oh, 100%. I have to work. I'm a little nervous about that. I was like, I have growth to do before we get to middle school. I'm not that mom. But yeah, so finding habits helped me get external peace so that my internal world didn't feel chaotic, and then just change the areas of life. Like it just made me grow hope that I wasn't broken, that I was capable of change. So then actually it's funny because then when I found so much hope and change, I then was like, I don't know about you, but I'm like, how do I solidify this and never lose this? So I was like, oh, I know if I teach other people,
it will help my own brain.
It'll help my own brain. I'll understand it. It'll be a refresh every 3 months that I open up my habit school will be a new time for me. And then to I'm deeply committed to being authentic. So I'm not going to teach something that I'm not living. So it's like taking the same marriage class every, 3 months. You're like, oh yeah, this is what I do for my environment habits, and then tweaking things. So it's like, I'm going through it on my own. So secretly, I just want to keep doing it so that I keep finding better and breakthrough. And then too, the cool part, what I've realized about habits is like my effort, it's never 1 for 1. I get 1% of effort is, or 1 unit of effort is like 5 times back the benefit that I get. So then I bought back more time. So I have more time to do the fun things that aren't overstimulating to my brain. So I'm actually resting. The irony is I have more chores and habits in place than I ever have in my life, but I also have more free time. I've been taking more naps. We have Sabbath with our family, like all these things that I didn't think I had time for. I've bought back time with efficiency and habits. And then also less chaotic in my brain.
I love that so much. I want to highlight a couple things. One, you talked about something that I think is really humbling for people, which is being able to reach out and ask for help to understand how, like, it may feel stupid to ask your friend, can I watch how you do laundry?
Yeah.
But if you let go of that ego shame and you embrace like, oh, my brain works different and I need to, for me, I learned a lot of reparenting skills, which is, it's not bad that I don't know this, because I used to feel like I don't know what every other human knows. I used to be like, everyone else can be an adult and I'm stuck in a kid brain. Like I am not I don't operate like a real human is how I felt. And so that is really defeating. And so instead the thought began to be, there are things I didn't learn as a kid. And because my parents didn't know I had ADHD, they weren't able to help me learn those skills. So reparenting is me. Now I get the chance to teach myself the things I never learned and to do it as a like be my own parent in this way. Like I'm going to get you the things that you need. I'm going to get you the resources you need. I'm going to have somebody come help you. Like when I started speaking, I had to have a friend help me sequence my talks because I couldn't sequence.
My husband does it for me. Yep.
And so, but I have actually learned now a little bit better how to sequence the more because I did it so often that it started getting into long-term a little bit more. But the humility of being like, I shouldn't have to do everything perfectly on my own without help. Like that is a belief that most people believe, like to be strong means I'm powerful and I can just know it all and do it all by myself. And I think it takes way more strength and way more bravery to ask people to be a part of your journey, to invite them in, and you get to bond. The people who helped me with my sermons, I will forever remember the like beautiful connection that we had through that process. And they got to feel like they were dramatically helping me and the whole world. And they were.
You're like, it was true. It was not blown out of proportion.
They saved everyone.
It's interesting because I do believe that to be really true with the ADHD people, but then now having probably helped like 100 people with habits, that's actually a common phrase that most people feel. So maybe as ADHD, we have more areas that we feel like we're not adulting.
Sure.
I don't, but then it feels like everybody has one area that they feel stuck, feel overwhelmed or whatever. So watching them through like, oh, can you give yourself grace to learn tools you didn't learn? And that's one of the homework assignments 1 week is to go figure out an area that you haven't nailed down and ask someone who you think does have it. What do they do? Almost like using it. I'm like, yeah, YouTube's great, but you don't know the context for that person. You don't know what their life's like. Go have a friend who like, if you can do this, I can do this. So what do you do versus like maybe this expert who has a psychiatry degree can handle children this way. I'm like, what do you do? Because you're like a lot like me. So I feel like your solutions will be applicable to my life. Yeah. So
it's way more fun. Like if I have a friend that I'm asking about it, then when I successfully do it like them, we get to celebrate together. Like you're bringing somebody in on the journey. People don't understand that that's the longest study they've done about what creates happiness is relationships. It was like an 80-year study that they did over people's whole lifetimes. And they took a bunch of different people and followed them for years and years and years and measured like how their happiness and all the different factors. And relationships is what impacted their joy the most in life, their fulfillment. And so you get to invite people in and celebrate them in deep ways.
And then it's cool. I know it sounds silly, but the areas that like Michelle has touched my laundry systems, every time I think of her, or like have a new spray bottle that so-and-so recommended. It's this fun like crossover. And even just like, I think instead of thinking we're deficit, like everybody, like what if we all helped?
Yes.
And we were like, contributed to answers around like, oh my gosh, like we have in our laundry system. I actually have a great laundry system now. We have this laundry tower that my husband built for our baskets.
Cool.
So I don't do laundry every day. I do it once a week with the kids, but the fresh clothes aren't piling up somewhere. They're peaceful, not chaotic in my garage in a ladder. So I've sent so many friends have come over with their husbands and like measured it or sent pictures.
To do it themselves.
Yes, go get a laundry ladder. It'll help your life.
I love that so much. Well, if you guys are listening, we recommend, I haven't read it yet, but I am going to read it. Driven to Distraction. I trust Jenna's.
Yeah.
This is a great example of ADHD recommendation.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I didn't know. I actually was laughing that we hadn't had one yet. I was like, wow, we've remembered everything.
No, there's been several times that I have completely forgotten and looked. Do you know, can I tell you one more ADHD thing I do? When people are talking, I try to guess what they're going to say before they say it. And it's so annoying to a lot of people because they'll be like, you won't believe they'll be like, you won't believe what I saw in the laundry room today. And I'd be like, is it a mouse? Is it a spray bottle? Or people will be talking and they'll be like, and then I just felt so, and they'll like pause thinking about the word and I'll be like, much shame, so much isolation, so much, but like it's simultaneously when people talk slowly, that's the thing that is hard for my brain to hold on to. But also if you're not talking slowly, I'm trying to actively listen to keep my focus.
Yeah.
And so if I can guess what you're about to say, it's like keeping my brain involved.
Yes. I wonder if this is why we're such good question askers. Because we're thinking ahead 4 steps. So then we unlock something in them that they.
Yes.
Oh, I do this. Do what you just described to my husband all the time. And he'll like get this smile, politely annoyed smile. He's like, can you let me talk instead of guessing what I'm going to say? I'm like, yeah. But it also translates to a superpower. If I can guess movie plot twist, like no one is, but can you too?
Yes.
I was like, when I watch them, I'm like, yeah. Yes. I'm like, oh, that guy's totally the killer because blah, 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 blah. And then Aaron comes back an hour later because I can't watch the movie. And he's like, you called it again.
I also can I really do empathize with people. And so sometimes I can describe for them a feeling they've never had before from that. So there's lots. If you can walk away with anything, walk away with this. There are pros and cons to the way every person's brain works.
Yeah.
And however your brain works, we want you to know that you're lovable and worthy and that you're powerful and you can make your life better no matter how your brain naturally functions. There's always ways we can create structure, strength, life hacks so that we can live the best life that we can, no matter where we started from. So
cheers to that. I was thinking we had something.
Yeah. Our empty glasses.
I was like, woohoo! There we go.
Cheers.
Nothing in them.
But one thing that I would like to just end on is if you do have ADHD, habits are very, very, very helpful. Jenna has a habit lab.
Yeah, my brand's Habit Lab, and it's a mastery course. It's 3 months walking people. I had made it a month, and then I was like, no, there's so many mindset shifts, and I want to be there as you iterate and revise. So I have a 3-month course that I walk people through in groups. There's virtual and online, or virtual and in person. The steps of habits, the tools of habits. You'll actually have a few up and running, but you'll get live group coaching, hear other people's ideas. It's fun.
Yeah. One of the things I love is you understand the emotional highs and lows. Like you have an emotional map of the habit process. So you're like, okay, on this week now, this thought is probably what you're starting to think, or this is now where you're probably wanting to give up this, or.
Yep. And it's funny. They'll be like, how did you know this week's video? And I was like, I know. This is when you're like, is it worth it? This is no longer fun to make my bed every day.
So she has a waiting list currently. Go ahead and reach out to her. Email or website or
Jenna Zint on Instagram or jennazint@gmail is my email.
Okay, wonderful.
Straightforward.
Share this with people. We did not cover all of it. Listen, there's too many things to talk about ADHD, but we do help that we do help. We do hope
that we hope
you at least got a little bit of the journey of it. I will end with this thought of I thought I was so stupid for years. And no matter what I did to prove it wrong, and I think this happens with a lot of people, you spend years trying to prove it wrong. I got A's on so many things. I had great scores. The person who actually talked to me about being dyslexic and having ADHD, she's in the top 2% of IQs in the world.
Wow.
But her brain doesn't work in all the ways mine doesn't work. And so taking off the ADHD or dyslexia or however your brain works doesn't necessarily equate to how smart you are. And then there's also so many kinds of smart that you can be. You can be like, I'm not directions smart. I'm not mechanical smart. Like as soon as people start saying anything in those things, my brain just shuts off. Like it's like, there's no point. Like quit trying to give me directions. I don't care. That is one thing I will say about ADHD we haven't covered is your brain will throw thoughts out that it feels is meaningless in order to hold on to other thoughts, which is not always helpful.
Mine is names, forever names. I'll be like, hi. Nope, still don't have it. Can you wear a name tag? Maybe.
Yes, because your brain is like constantly sorting through information and it can't hold it all.
It's true. But like I could tell them every emotion they explained to me about their childhood, where they grew up. But I'm like, I don't know your name.
Yes. So the goal is you can be smart in whatever way, and just telling you that whatever you think you'll do to prove it wrong won't actually prove it wrong. You have to actually reconcile your relationship with yourself. You have to see yourself through eyes of compassion. You have to begin to be kind to yourself and begin to see that there's more to you than the labels or the programming that you've had. So
that's good.
I want to leave people on that note.
I was laughing. I was like, you're like the only person I don't know where it's going. So everybody else, I'm like, yep, I see that. B, C, D, E, F. And I'm like, who knows? She might pull out an X. And I did not see that coming, but I wholeheartedly agree with that conclusion.
So thanks so much for listening, guys. Go ahead and like, subscribe, share. Sharing it is the number one way that people hear about our podcast and the number one way we have people. Right. We get people writing into us all the time about their whole families changing. And it always goes back to someone shared this with me or somebody shared it. And I don't even remember how I found it, except somebody posted it on Instagram. So it really does matter when you guys do that. And I appreciate it. So there's that. If you want, you can get our compassion project. It's at www.justinandabby.com.
Dun, dun, dun.
We'll see you guys later.
Bye.